Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
Welcome. This evening, 5 explosions were heard shaking the Iraqi capital of Baghdad, according to an announcement made by spokesman for the coalition forces. He does not yet know the source of these explosions. Meanwhile, Iraqi policemen began a campaign to search homes in Tikrit, the birthplace of ousted President Saddam Hussein. This is the first operation to be carried out without direct support from U.S. forces. About 400 Iraqi policemen in training conducted the raids, looking for weapons, explosives, and members suspected to be linked to recent attacks and the downing of a Black Hawk helicopter last week. In Washington, the civil administrator in Iraq, Paul Bremer, said that the Iraqi Governing Council must decide for itself a timeline for creating a constitution and conducting elections. At the White House, he was questioned about the situation in Iraq, after having met with the National Security Agency and many officials from George Bush's administration. He spoke of the developing situation in Iraq and the performance of the interim governing council. The new Palestinian cabinet formed by Ahmed Correa was approved with a vote of confidence by the Legislative Council. The Speaker of the Council, Rafi al-Natja, announced that 48 members who attended the session voted in favor of the cabinet. 13 members voted against and 5 abstained. At the start of the session, which was held at the headquarters in Ramallah, Palestinian President Arafat confirmed that Israelis have the right to live in peace alongside the Palestinians.
The Israeli government's goal, via this war, is a lesson which is not a secret to our people or the Arab community. It is not a secret to our countries and people of the world. It is a dangerous goal, denying our people from our land, our rights, and our independent state, and from sacred Jerusalem, which is being surrounded by a flood of settlers. A cancer from all sides, surrounding us by this new Berlin Wall.
17 Italian soldiers and 8 Iraqis were killed, while a large number of people were wounded when a truck collided into the Italian military police base in the southern city of al-Nasiriyah. The vehicle immediately exploded, causing great damage to the base. Many soldiers are still under the rubble. This is the first attack against Italian troops, consisting of 3,000 soldiers in Iraq.
The Italian Minister of Defense, Antonio Martino, is blaming Saddam and his loyalists for the attack on the Italian base in southern Iraq. Many people from both the Iraqi and Italian sides were killed or wounded when the truck loaded with explosives detonated inside the Italian military police base in the Iraqi city of al-Nasiriyah. This attack occurred in a city which is considered to be relatively calm, and it's where more than 2,300 Italian soldiers are stationed. Once again, this attack proves that the coalition's security maneuvers are flawed.
This is a barbarous act. Our men are part of the peacekeeping forces, working on maintaining stability and achieving democracy.
The Italian ambassador made these remarks questioning the purpose of this attack, since Washington is currently trying to speed up the transfer of authority to the Iraqi government. However, U.S. officials are saying that this step is not a strategy for leaving the country.
My thoughts go first to the families of the Carbonari killed in this despicable act of terrorism, or share their pain. The officers were killed while carrying out their duty to help the people of Iraq recover peace, order, and security.
This incident rattled Italy. but their prime minister still announced that they will keep their troops in Iraq, meanwhile condemning this attack, which is the bloodiest since the attack on Najaf last August, killing more than 80 Iraqis.
This is not a time to be talking about politics. I believe there should be conscious thought of ending US and British military presence, as well as their allies.
The views of this Italian opposition is shared by many people in political circles around the world. What is the fate of the foreign military presence in Iraq? And what is the future of the country, now that the coalition forces have fulfilled their goal of toppling Saddam's regime?
Now live from Baghdad, our correspondent Hamza Hussein. Hamza, what are the reasons behind this explosion?
Fadila, this is the second explosion in the past 2 days. The first explosion was last night in Baquba. In the opposite direction, in Al-Nasiriyah, the attack occurred at 10 a.m. this morning. Eyewitnesses report that the attack took place at the Italian headquarters on Zaytun Street, previously Al-Nasiriyah's Chamber of Commerce. It is said that the Italian soldiers had a special relationship with the people, since they went out with them and sat in their cafes. Thus, the explosion contradicts the situation in Nasiriyah, which is relatively calm in comparison to Baghdad or other cities in the north or the west. The Iraqis who reject this philosophy of violence that has been going on since the beginning of Ramadan are not being blamed for this operation. Fadila?
With everything you are saying, Hamza, how do you explain these violent acts in Al-Nasiriyah? And as you just said, it's one of the calmer cities in Iraq.
Maybe the bombers who are suspected to be Al-Qaeda members or are from the Iraqi resistance, maybe they want to ignite the calmer cities and turn the people against the US forces. Therefore, we can't say that an Iraqi city is calm amid the abnormal security situation in Iraq. Sabotage reaches calm cities and creates a security havoc. I predict that every Iraqi city is going to be threatened by sabotage from those who are trying to harm Iraq's security and stability.
Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Yuri Fedotov said that Russia theoretically could not rule out the deployment of a United Nations peacekeeping force in Iraq amid a worsening of the situation there that is causing serious concern in Moscow. And in other developments, a group of US congressmen paid a visit to Damascus calling for dialogue to improve ties between the two countries. The visit came as the US Congress gave its final approval of the Syria Accountability Act in a vote of 89-4. The bill would result in economic sanctions, but some Democrat senators fear the vote could pave the way for military aggression against Syria. Despite US threats, Syria stressed on the importance of a dialogue, saying it should take into account the interests of both countries.
The U.S. Congress gave its final approval of the U.S.-imposed Syria Accountability and Lebanese Sovereignty Act in a vote of 89-4. The act means that new tough sanctions would be imposed on Syria, from economic restrictions to downgrading Washington's diplomatic representation. The bill states that Syria must end its support for so-called terrorism, terminate what it termed its occupation of Lebanon, stop efforts to obtain or produce weapons of mass destruction, and stop so-called terrorists and weapons from entering Iraq.
It is a country that sponsors terrorism, that supports terrorism, that encourages terrorism, not only against American interests, not only against Israel, but it is occupying through setting up these terrorist organizations, as well as their own military force, occupying what was a very moderate and progressive Arab country, Lebanon.
But Robert Bard, one of the 3 senators who voted against the measure, feared the vote could later lead to military aggression against Syria. Bard and the 3 senators want the bill to be limited to economic sanctions.
We don't want to go to war with Syria. We just want to say, in a truthful way, these are the things that you've been doing wrong. Please meet these markers. Help us in the world. And if you don't, we're going to have some sanctions.
The vote was passed as U.S. congressmen met with Syrian President Bashar al-Assad and his Foreign Minister Farouk al-Shara in Damascus. Syria stressed that dialogue with the United States is important, but it noted that the U.S. should take into consideration the interests of both countries, which should be fair for both. Jim Colby, a Republican leading the delegation, called for dialogue as well to improve ties despite the threat of sanctions.
We had a very good discussion this morning with President Assad and also with the foreign minister. We understand there are still major differences between the United States and Syria in our policies, but we believe that a dialogue is the way in which we can help to repair that relationship.
President Assad had once again cleared Syria's stance toward the Iraqi issue. He told Jeremy Greenstock, UK ambassador to the UN, that there should be an elected Iraqi government, a constitution acceptable to all Iraqis, and for Iraqis to assume power themselves.
We talked about politics, about the economics of Iraq, about security, and I think Syria and the United Kingdom to bring change, and there will be some continuing security problems.
But despite all the pressures that Syria is undergoing, Damascus sees these visits as an acknowledgement of its regional role and its course of political dialogue.
London's Metropolitan Police said on Tuesday that officers were still negotiating a route for a Stop Bush march planned for November 20 to coincide with a 3-day visit by US President George W. Bush. Fearing the march would be a threat to Bush, White House planners have reportedly pressed British authorities to virtually shut down most of central London in a major security operation expected to run into millions of pounds and involve 4,000 police officers and 250 American Secret Service agents. The visit by Bush to the British capital comes at a difficult time for both countries, given the coalitions to find weapons of mass destruction and continuing unrest in Iraq. It is expected to act as a magnet for protesters from all over Europe.
Nuclear weapons. The biggest insult of all is the idea that we can be excluded in an exclusion zone from the traditional marching grounds in our own capital city for the comfort of the least welcome foreign visitor since William the Conqueror 1,000 years ago. We will not accept being excluded from Whitehall and Parliament Square.
Israeli journalist sources said that the head of the Israeli negotiating personnel, Ilan Biran, told Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon that the promise to set free all the Lebanese detainees was given in fact, but in past negotiations and not in the current talks. For his part, the head of Israeli Foreign Intelligence, Meir Dagan, said the position of Hezbollah Secretary General Said Hassan Nasrallah on the swap operation is a matter of principle. It is serious and not tactical, he said.
As Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon reiterated his stance that Israel will not set free the Lebanese detainee Samir Kontar in the prisoner swap operation with Hezbollah, Israeli journalistic sources said that the head of the Israeli negotiating personnel, Ilan Biran, told Sharon that the pledge to set free all the Lebanese detainees was given in fact, but in past negotiations and not in the current talks. The sources also said the name of Samir Kontar was mentioned in the list set by the Justice Ministry and a committee including members from the Israeli Army and General Security Shabak. The source further said the German mediator has stressed on the release of Kontar as his name is mentioned in the original list. Israeli daily Yadda'at Ahronot quoted the head of Israeli Foreign Intelligence Meir Dagan as saying the position of Hezbollah Secretary General Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah on the swap operation is a matter of principle. It is serious and not tactical. Dagan added that Nasrallah will not hesitate in stopping the deal if it will not take place with all the conditions he sets. For his part, Sharon called on the head of the Shabak, Avi Dakhtar, to travel to Europe to obtain information on the missing co-pilot, Ron Arad.
I charged the head of Shabak with an extra mission, which is to accept every effort possible to find everything new about Ron Arad.
Meanwhile, Israeli officials picked on the statement made by Israeli Defense Minister Shaul Mofaz that says Israel will kidnap Hezbollah senior officials in an attempt to obtain information on Ron Arad.
I don't believe the policy of kidnapping will bear the desired results. Dirani and Sheikh Ubaid were both senior officials. Their kidnapping didn't lead us to where we want to get Ron Arad. I don't believe Nasrallah himself would bear better results.
Israeli military commentator in Israeli daily Haaretz, Zaif Shef, wrote Israel fell in the psychological war launched by Hezbollah, whom he referred to as giving a lesson for the Israelis and managing to evoke inter-Israeli disputes. He described Hezbollah as a terrorist organization that challenged Israel in a way that no Arab country did. Israeli daily Yadu'at Ahronot also wrote that the prisoner swap operation is another evidence on the way in which the mind of Nasrallah operates. It is a smart political operation on the level of Lebanese and Arab politics. The Daily said the head of Hezbollah knew how to trouble our collective mind.
Israel's Foreign Minister Sylvain Shalom said, "When the Palestinians make it easier for us, we will make it easier for them." Concerning the prisoner swap deal between Israel and Hezbollah, the Foreign Minister said that the Israeli government will discuss the deal on Sunday. Shalom gave a speech after meeting with the governor of Maryland, Robert Ehrlich, during his visit to the country.
That there are a few difficulties now among the Palestinians leadership. Not all of them will accept the situation that Arafat will control the security forces and won't give the authority to the new Prime Minister Abu Ala to control the security forces. So it doesn't look now that they have solved all their difficulties. We should be prepared to resume the negotiations with the Palestinians. We are working on it within the ministry here and with other ministries in the Israeli government. I think we should do it, even that we are not so sure that there is a partner in the other side. But if there will be a partner that will be willing to move forward in the peace process and to put an end to terrorism, violence and incitement, I think we should be ready in advance, and that's what we are working on it now, because I believe that the only formula that exists is that the Palestinians will ease the life of the Israelis by putting an end to the terrorism attacks. It will bring back the security and the safety to the people of the State of Israel. It will help us to recover the economy. And I think that we should ease the life of the Palestinians by implementing gestures toward the Palestinian people. There was a proposal for a few weeks now. It was negotiated by two parties. In the last few days, it was positive progress. And the Prime Minister decided to bring it to a vote in the next meeting of the Cabinet on this coming Sunday. I believe that all the details will be given to the ministers, and everyone will have to decide how is going to vote. It's not so easy. Any kind of decision, I think, will be criticized here in the Israeli public opinion.
Prince Hassan bin Talal stressed the importance of involving Jordan in the peace efforts to solve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict over the capital Jerusalem and the refugee crisis. Prince Hassan was interviewed by Dan Marguerite from the Israeli Channel 1. The following is a synopsis of the special interview.
Hussein and Ishaq Rabin went out of their way to sign peace because they knew they were doing what was right. And your question about the implementation is entirely correct, that on both sides, I think bureaucracies and vested interests have made it not a people's peace. A peace in which everyone participates is a peace that endures. And that's what I think I said to you in '95 when we met, that this is not a peace about talking heads, it's a peace about people. The quartet is finding difficulty in working together. And I think the time has come where the US, Europe, Russia and the UN have to look at the region as a whole. Secondly, I think there's an alternative homeland that has always been spoken about. Jordan is Palestine. And there I'd just like to say that if we are inclusionist as host countries for refugees, we insist on the right of return, we insist on the right to compensation, historically that is. I remember with Ishaq Rabin, he would say no to the right of return and we'd say yes. And I would say, well, your no doesn't invalidate our yes until we found something better. Yeah. Maybe the something better is to look at a poverty alleviation program for everyone in this region to dry the swamps of terror by attending to despair and to poverty. And lastly, I'd like to say that the territories occupied in '67 were occupied from a sovereign state called Jordan. Your Israeli negotiator used to say only 2 countries recognize opposition in Jerusalem, and I'd say, well, there are 2 more than recognize yours. But I'm not with points here. All I'm trying to say is that Jordan still has a responsibility when the Palestinians and the Israelis have finally come to the end of whatever process they want to describe, Oslo, Geneva, what have you. Jordan has a supportive role in the issue of territory, settlements, refugees and water. I don't think that Jordan is in a position to accept more refugees, but Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, Egypt are countries that have hosted refugees, have differing policies as far as how refugees are treated. But I think an inclusionist democratic policy that includes all Jordanians of Palestinian origin wishing to become citizens is very much a part of the vision of my late brother.
The Israeli army announced that the Israeli government decided to ease the closures imposed on many Palestinian cities in the West Bank, except in the cities of Nablus and Jenin. The military source said that the Palestinians can use their cars to move between their cities if they first obtain special permission from the Israeli authorities. Meanwhile, Israeli settlers cut down hundreds of olive trees on Palestinian land. When the residents of Al-Zawiya village went to their agricultural fields, they found hundreds of trees cut by chainsaws. On another topic, the Israeli Knesset went through a heated debate over the Israeli budget. Parties threatened to leave the government coalition, but the finance minister intervened and was able to make an agreement with the Shinoi party after it threatened to vote against the new budget. The situation in Israel was tense because the Israeli General Labor Union, the Histadrut, threatened a general strike on the 3rd of November, but the strike was cancelled by an order from the Israeli Superior Court.
The image of the Palestinian victim whose land is occupied, life is made miserable and dignity is humiliated by Israel. The images of settlements and the separating wall that destroy Palestinian lands and lives. These images are behind the European public resentment against Israel. Prominent Israeli journalists reached this conclusion in articles that were published alongside misguided official Israeli explanation of the results of the latest poll survey conducted in Europe. The Israeli army and government were suddenly awakened. They decided to make more accommodation to the Palestinians in order to make their daily lives less difficult, like allowing them to move between cities and to enter Israel for work. In addition, the Israeli government is now launching an intensive media campaign to show that some random settlements are being dismantled in different areas in the West Bank. The deteriorating image of Israel at the international level coincided with the internal divisions, opening the door for struggle over power between Israeli parties, which may have future implications. As the Knesset started discussing the new budget, massive strike was declared in Israel. More privatization initiatives were introduced, delivering a fatal blow to the state-owned economy. The foundation of what is known as the market model is being enforced in Israel. These reforms have political implications. The social foundation of the Zionist Labor Party and the General Labor Union, known as the Histadrut, is weakened. Another new development in Israel is the increasing opposition to the Israeli iron fist policy in the occupied territories. Israelis are increasingly willing to accept the Palestinian proposal, ceasefire in return for a ceasefire. They are now willing to drop the idea of eliminating the Palestinian resistance factions and creating a civil war as a precondition for resuming peace negotiations with the Palestinians. At the same time, Israeli political observers are concerned because of the continued struggle over powerful positions in the new Palestinian government. The emergency government headed by Ahmed Korea was extended one more week until the debate is resolved over whether to leave the security apparatus in Arafat's hands or not. Meanwhile, Washington has intervened with a threatening tone by asking Arafat to transfer his control over the security agencies to the new government as precondition for reestablishing contacts with the United States and returning to the roadmap for peace.
Iranian President Mohammad Khatami told reporters on Wednesday that the recent IAEA report holds positive points and that the paper clearly demonstrates Iran is not after developing nuclear weapons. Elsewhere in his remarks, however, the chief executive said the report is unacceptable in some parts, adding according to an agreement Iran established with the Europeans, it fulfilled all its commitments promised to the agency, and it will. The president assured that if the case is dealt with technically, no problem will arise. Iran says it expects the European Union to make practical steps to boost cooperation between Iran and the UN nuclear watchdog. The remarks was made by Iranian Foreign Minister Kamal Kharrazi on Wednesday when he got on the phone with EU Foreign Policy Commissioner Chris Patton. Kharrazi told the senior EU diplomat that the recent report by Mohammad al-Bradi to the IAEA Board of Governors reaffirms Iran's transparent record with the IAEA. The EU Foreign Policy Commissioner, for his part, hoped Iran-EU ties will broaden further. European Union welcomed Iran's move to sign the additional protocol to the NPT, saying it is profoundly eager to expand all-out ties with Tehran. Following the release of a confidential IAEA report, U.S. State Department spokesman said the report has widened our concerns about Iran. U.S.-based Washington Times quoted White House officials as saying that the United States will hold talks with its allies before November the 20th Board of Governors meeting convenes. The International Atomic Energy Agency had said earlier it reached no document proving Tehran is after nuclear bombs.
Mosaic is made possible by a grant from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, which promotes journalism excellence worldwide and invests in the vitality of 26 U.S. communities, and the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. Additional support is provided by the Firedoll Foundation and Henry and Virgilia Dakin.